founders very often come to us and they ask for benchmarks or milestones. And I'm like, dudes, like, do you care? Like, should you care? Like, fuck that, no? Like, do you have a big problem to solve? Do you like genuinely believe that you can solve the problem? Go fucking do it.
That is Ondrej Bartos, co-founder of Credo Ventures. Ondrej was one of the first people I reached out to when I started the podcast. And the reason for it was that Ondrej is the opposite of the stereotypical venture capitalist you might imagine. And at the same time, Ondrej is probably the most important figure in developing the venture ecosystem in Central and Eastern Europe. He put both regions on the map with huge breakout successes like UiPath and 11 Labs.
I feel like venture has become too mainstream and too big and too popular and too flashy and too, attractive for so many people to jump in.
In this episode, we go beyond the superficialities of the usual VC conversations.
Okay, this is deeper than I thought.
And we'll discuss how the venture model will evolve.
If there's a space where it's possible to build a unicorn without venture capital, the founders definitely should do it.
This is the Venture Lab podcast, and I'm your host, Luis.
Ladies and gentlemen, by way of introduction.
Ondrej, when we look at your life through the different ventures that you went through, and also the massive shifts in technology, entrepreneurship, and investing that are happening today, what is the most important thing that you think we should talk about?
Hi. Thanks for having me. I'm not sure really. Important things to talk about. We can talk about loads of things. We can talk about what's happening in tech. We can talk about current state of venture. We can talk about what we believe the future will bring. But importance is very relative, and so it's hard for me to say what the important things are.
And what do you think will affect the industry of VC the strongest? You were talking, for instance, about the developments in technology and AI that then will affect the industry of venture. So I think they are like very closely correlated, those developments. So what do you think, which direction is this heading?
Well, I mean, those things are correlated because in order for having, successful venture capital industry and successful venture capitalists, you also have to have the opportunities to invest, right? And what I think is going to happen, well, first of all, I think the whole industry will be going through changes. I personally do feel that there's probably too much of venture capital these days, too many venture firms, too many venture capitalist investors. So I think I am not the biggest fan of the sort of industrialization that's been happening in the past, say, 5-7 years. I feel like venture has become too mainstream and too big and too popular and too flashy and too, attractive for so many people to sort of jump in. And I admit, and it may be the old school talking, or I'm just being a Grinch, but I admit I still view venture as a very niche discipline, as a very niche subset of the alternative investment space, and I feel in my mind it makes sense that venture would be going back in that direction.
Yeah.
And why do you think this has happened over the last years, that venture became more mainstream, much more popular, and that more people are like pursuing that path? Because I think before it was mostly something that people like somehow got into, not knowing what it was and how they got into it. And right now it's like people like graduate and they say, okay, I want to get into venture capital. Why do you think, how did this happen, this transition?
I I I think it's a function of the growing success of
Mm,
venture-backed companies. I
yeah.
think sort of the cloud era and the huge wave of SaaS and cloud startups had produced an unprecedented opportunity for outsized returns, and the rise of unicorns, up until a point in which we had 1,500 unicorns around the world. That means that a lot of people made a lot of money out of venture investments in those startups. And success is very tempting and attractive. So that started sort of dragging people to venture, either joining existing firms or even more starting their own firms, and then joining existing firms and then leaving to start their new venture firms. And boom, we have a huge industry now, which gets covered in mainstream media, and Uber drivers know all about venture. I I am pretty positive that it's gotten a little out of hand, and it has to go back to basics more.
And why do you think it has to go back, besides your impersonification of the Grinch? But why do you think it would be good for the industry of venture to become more niche, very concentrated again?
I think the whole design of venture is it's supposed to be a niche category. It is, venture, the whole point is looking for outliers, and an outlier by definition is someone exceptional, something that doesn't happen a lot. So there are not too many outliers. And that means that, there shouldn't be too many venture capitalists.
Yeah, makes sense, especially now when there are also many other ways to fund your business. I mean, many like, for instance, seed strapping, or like bootstrapping in general, which is, I think, increasing in popularity as well. And then if we look at the beginning of your career, like you studied business, and I was wondering, why did you choose business? Like, what was your earliest fascination that led you to pursue that path?
Yeah, I mean, that goes way back, Louis. I'm not even sure I remember well. But like, you have to understand that I went to college in the early 90s. It was really just a short time after socialism fell in Eastern Europe. And so we did not have the optionality that today's kids have. And I feel like, my decision to go study business or economics, to be more
Okay,
exact,
yeah.
um, was not a very sophisticated one. Like I had always um, excelled in technical subjects, especially like maths, but not to the extent that I would go study maths, which leads to some sort of application of maths, and that brought me onto the economics, finances, and accounting, and that's what I studied.
And you mentioned like the fall of socialism. Like, what was the earliest context of you growing up? Because I personally believe that the earliest context probably affects a person like strongest and has an impact also on the further trajectory of life. So I'm curious, like, were there any experiences that you think still had an impact on who you are today?
I mean, the whole growing up and the whole childhood and youth is had for sure been impactful. If you're asking about the first sort of exposure to business,
No, also in more general, like for instance, some people have like if you have like siblings or like you have for instance parents that like went a certain direction or that inspired you to be ambitious or just like in a very broad scale, like what kind of defined or impacted you at an early age?
okay, this is deeper than I thought. So so my parents were not business people, and like back during communism, it was also not really an option. So my dad was an actor and theater director, and my mom was a teacher. And I think so, I didn't have any exposure to, business per se. What they tried doing with me, and I was the only child. I feel what I got from them was, you know, sort of the understanding and passion for freedom in terms of like personal freedom, not doing what others tell us to do, but always trying to find ways to, be free in our decision making, which sounds funny because in communism, nobody's really
Mm.
fully free. And what they also taught me early on was the importance of looking at the world as opposed to just our town, city, community, or country. And they just pushed me to learn languages very early. So, my dad was teaching me German. They put me into school where there was early English. The school didn't teach me English very well, but it was more like this mindset that those things are important.
I think that's very impressive that they taught you or gave this on your way because it was a very different time. I mean, I know it from my parents as well. But so we can now continue the conversation in German.
Ah, ah.
Yeah. No, but when you were answering, this quote from Steve Jobs came to my head where you were saying you can only connect the dots looking backwards, and I think it really made me think of it because you were saying that you got taught to think maybe differently or also contrarian or to just not follow the herd mentality. And I think that's something that is very important for venture as well, right?
For sure, for sure.
And then, so after you had started a consulting business, you moved on to investing. And how did you get into it? Like, what fascinated you about the investment side? Because I can imagine that it was very niche at the time.
It was niche back then to the extent that it was pretty much inexistent, right? So the way I got into venture was that the company we had back in the 90s was like a small, low-key consulting business, which also started to present itself as a market research. One of the products that we started promoting, although we had no experience, was market research. And we get an inquiry from someone in the US to do a market research on venture capital. And like the first thing we did was, search what venture capital meant.
Yeah.
So you know, at school, I did study economics and business, but we never heard that word. Sure. And so that was the first I heard about it. and it sounded interesting. So what happened was actually we then later that year we decided to organize a conference on venture capital in the Czech Republic and in Central Eastern Europe. And we started bringing in people for this conference. And we ended up doing, I think, 3 editions. So for 3 years, we did the first venture capital conference here. And that was 98, 99. So it was pretty early on.
Yeah.
And I think by coincidence, we discovered venture at a time when it started to be really sexy in the US and in the UK and in Western Europe. So we started reading about, everything that was happening in the dot-com bubble. And that was fascinating and exciting. And it almost went against many of the things we learned at school, right? Like you probably don't remember. Back then, people used to call it new economy. They were saying that, different rules apply to this new economy. This is not old economy. This was, new economy. So I think it started really, that was the first wave of interest in venture capital. And because it was so fascinating, we kept reading about it, and we were interacting with people that were closer to the action because they came from the UK or from France and even from the US.
Yeah.
And so that was when the interest was sparked. But I actually got into venture a lot later. So it was like a very slow process.
I think it's interesting that you got into venture like through organizing events, because now I feel like events are all over the place. So like networking events, fireside chats, whatever it is, large tech conferences. Do you think we have too many of them, or what do you think about their formats, like in succession to what you were organizing back then and the quality of it? Because I'm sometimes thinking that, especially those large tech conferences, that they kind of dismiss the point, because at some point it gets to a scale that it's not personal anymore, while the very first intention of in-person events is to create those personal relationships. What do you think about it?
I agree. In general, everything is interesting up until the point when there's too much of it, right? Like that does not apply only to events. It applies to venture capital, as we discussed at the beginning, right? Like it is interesting, it is highly relevant up until the point when there's just too much. So I agree, there's too many events and there's too many networking events and there's too many conferences and there's too many trade shows these days and there's too much venture capital and there's too many tech media and
too many podcasts.
Too many podcasts for sure.
To make this list full.
100%.
So and when you started Credo, you were one of the, like, it was different back then. You were one of the first VCs in Central and Eastern Europe that with big ambitions for like real startup investing. And as we talked about, this has changed. So there's much more competition with like large local VCs, but also European big funds coming over. I'm wondering, how has your value proposition with Credo evolved over the time to until now, where it's a much more crowded market?
Well, it's evolved for sure. When we started Credo, it was an eccentric experiment. It was building something that never was, at least, in the Central and Eastern European context. And also, before we started, we went to, a bunch of people who were experienced, like in Western Europe or in the US, and we were sort of consulting with them, and most of them were telling us, don't do it. That's
Yeah.
crazy. It's not gonna work. It's way too niche. There's no deal flow. There
Yeah.
are no opportunities. Some were advising us to do small private equity instead, doing majorities, searching for companies in trouble. But we had this thesis, we had this passion. We believed in the region. We saw the initial success stories, and there was just a handful, but there were some, and we just believed that it was possible. So that's when we put together basically high net worth individuals' money and put them into the first small fund, and we tried managing everybody's expectations in a way that, guys, this will probably not work,
Yeah.
but like, do you want us to try?
Yeah.
We want to try.
Yeah.
And so the value proposition was very different because we didn't have much money, but we have some money. We had some money, and nobody else had money for startups.
Yeah.
Nobody wanted to fund anything that didn't have revenue or didn't have product market fit or couldn't show, 5 years of track record. So I think it was money. Pretty early on, we realized, as well as the founders in the market, realized that it's not just money, that it might be something else that matters, and that is the real support and the real help. But I think we did start with money. Today, money's everywhere, and so many people have money that they want to put into innovative startups, and be a part of the flashy world. So the proposition today has to be different.
Because yeah, talking about this like what makes it different, like beyond capital, I think one thing that really stood out for me with Credo was your people-focused approach. And I wanted to ask, how does this belief of like human first translate into your investment strategy?
It is very important in our investment strategy. It's one of the centerpieces.
Yeah.
It's one of the most important parts of the investment strategy. And it's something that we have focused on since the very beginning. During Fund One, we always talked about, founder centricity and the importance of, the people in the business, the team founders first. But I think over time, our conviction in this approach has only grown. We ultimately believe that people are what matters. It is not only people. We are aware of examples of projects, startups, companies where excellent teams just, don't have the right timing, or they miss a window, or they make several wrong decisions, although they're a great team and they just miss the boat. But the people are still the most important part, and that's written in our investment strategy.
Yeah. I think the difference is to actually act on it, right? Because like the like for founder centric, people focused approach, you read it everywhere. But I know that you are very much interested in the reason why people or founders are building their companies. So not only in what they're building. And in the first conversations that you have with the founder, do you have a go-to question that you're asking that proved to be most revealing in that regard?
No.
No.
Every founder conversation is different. We do
Okay.
not have checklists. We do not
Yeah.
have, you know, scorecards or stuff. But my approach, like when meeting a founder for the first time, I just like chatting.
Mm.
I just chat. I ask about silly things.
Like
I
what?
like like anything. Like he comes in black jeans. I ask him if he or she likes black jeans, or ever wears blue jeans, or did they buy the jeans. I don't know, silly
Yeah.
things that are, because, well, what I'm trying to do there is two things. First, sort of build relationship, like get close to the person, and then second is sort of serve towards values, beliefs, motivations, like feelings, opinions, and those are all things that matter, because I believe venture is such a personal thing, and people are the most important part. I want to try to understand them as well as I can. And that also happens by silly questions. Of course, I then ask them about the
Yeah.
business and
Yeah.
what the product is, and
Yeah.
why they believe it should work, and how they get
Mm.
in the hands of the customers. But I do often start with silly questions.
Yeah, I can imagine that in the end they are probably most revealing because everyone will tell you that their business idea is great and that the startup is going to perform well. They're not going to say the opposite. So yeah, and you have worked with many exceptional founders, like for instance Daniel Dines and from UiPath and Hubert Palin from Product Board. What is your best self-improvement advice that you would give to a young person, like having worked with those people and also having experienced how people can develop over a rather short period of time?
I generally don't like giving advice too much. And even like at board meetings or on the boards where I'm a member or an
Mm.
observer, I I don't like giving advice. I like asking questions. I like giving, my opinions or positions.
Yeah.
I don't like giving advice because, like, everything is so sort of individual and different from anything else that that I don't feel like I'm actually, I'm a bit envious. Some people put, mentor on their LinkedIn, or I advise startups. Like, I'm always like, ooh, those guys must be really smart, because
Yeah.
like I don't feel like I can mentor people or give them advice.
Yeah.
I'm happy to offer my opinion. I would not give advice.
That's fair. When speaking to you, I get the sense that there's not much that can throw you off, that you're very grounded yourself. Is this something that you developed like over years, or was it always like this?
I think it was always like that.
So it's not that venture made you that way because you have seen like things go wrong, things going great, and at the end, like you just realize that, it in the end it only partially matters.
I think it could also be the other way around. Like, I survived in venture because I am grounded
Yeah.
like that,
Yeah.
Because I also feel like most people should not do venture because it's such a complex and difficult job, actually.
And I want to talk a bit with you also about the European ecosystem in general, because you have massively contributed to building the ecosystem in Central and Eastern Europe. And I looked up some numbers. So from 2012 to 2022, it grew more than tenfold. So from 80 million to 820 million in investment, and then now to 2.8 billion in 2024. And I was curious, what do you think are the most important factors that contributed to this growth in investments?
I think it was as I'd say already, it was growing number of success stories, including, coming out of CEE, coming out of region, which has dragged sort of more people into the industry and more money. And then, COVID was one of the factors. Like, 2021 was a boom of people's perception of technology. It was driven by, e-commerce, among other things. And I feel like that's when many parts of tech really became like a mainstream topic, and also, capital was really cheap. So those are probably some of the reasons.
Yeah. And for the venture landscape in general, like we are seeing that with the technological advancement, companies are reaching profitability much earlier. So I was curious, what do you think? How far are we from a single person unicorn?
I don't know if it's gonna happen this year, but I wouldn't be surprised.
Yeah. And what is the role of an investor in this world of a single person unicorn? Because we were talking about network, teams, like everything that you provide beyond capital, and then it's not needed anymore.
I think we will see a one-person unicorn,
Hmm.
or a bunch of people unicorn, with no need for external investment, and that's fine. But we cannot. This does not scale. Like, it's not possible to build unicorns in every corner of the market. It's possible usually in very sort of niche first mover advantageous situations. It's not possible for everybody.
Yeah.
So I still believe there's going to be space for venture. I still believe that in most parts of innovation or technology, there will be adventurous, risk-taking capital needed. And if there's a space where it's possible to build a unicorn without venture capital, the founders definitely should do it. I would not push myself onto them if they don't need me.
Yeah. And I mean, with the landscape changing so quickly, I think also like things that might have been true 5 years ago are not anymore. So I'm wondering on the founder side, what do you think is the best or a good way to build a startup today than in comparison to maybe 5 to 10 years ago?
I think there's one fundamental thing about founders or building companies or building startups which does not change. And that is, I fundamentally believe that the best way to build an amazing company is to follow a passion, coming out of sort of deep belief that I can solve an existing problem, and then just go out and try to execute the best you can. And like, founders very often come to us and they ask for, benchmarks or milestones or, definitions and comparisons. And I'm like, dudes, like, do you care? Like, should you care? Like, fuck that, no? Like, do you have a big problem to solve? Do you like genuinely believe that you can solve the problem? Just go fucking do it. And if you do it as a byproduct, you're gonna have a valuable company. Or if what you need for it is venture capital, go raise it. If you don't need it for it, then don't. Like, it's I think very often and I blame the industrialization of venture. People should go back to like first principles and like ask the really simple questions, you know.
Yeah. A couple of days ago, I heard the story from the founder of Lovable, Anton Ossiker, that when they were supposed to raise, or when they were raising money, and they missed the data room because they were just focused on building the product, and then the VCs, they were basically panicking. They were like, "Oh, they're talking to other people," and then in the end, it turned out they were just like, "Oh, I didn't know that's actually important. Like, okay, like we can do it next time. Like we were focusing on shipping." So yeah, it's probably what you're referring to.
Exactly right.
How many meetings or how long does it usually take you to understand like if the founder or the company or the idea is worth investing in for you?
That's a difficult question because, you know, sometimes I feel like sometimes I just know after, you know, a couple of minutes, or one meeting. But if I say that, I would I would seem dumb or superficial or, you know, shallow. So I'll start by saying that we always aim to, you know, have several, probably, I don't know, as many as 6 or 8 meetings. We always aim for in person. I think we, after the 2 or 3 years of COVID, we pretty much set it as mandatory to actually meet in person, because it's a it's an order of magnitude better, better experience, and it's more indicative. So we always try doing these things. But that being said, you know, sometimes I just knew after a couple of minutes, I knew I wanted to work with the person, and I knew I loved the spark in the eye or whatever. It is highly individual.
Yeah. Andre, I always like to think of life in different phases. So I'm curious, like, which phase are you currently in, and what would you say is next for you personally and for Credo?
Next for me is vacation with my kids,
Oh.
next week. So that's what's next. Next for Credo, we're currently investing out of our Fund 4, so I assume next for Credo is Fund 5. Um, you know, everything else, you know the saying that God is laughing when we make plans. I don't I don't know what's next. Credo, I feel like we have built healthy foundations, and I do like where we've gotten with Credo. It is really hard to keep up, and you are absolutely right that the competition has been tightening, but we're doing the best we can to keep up. So we'll keep doing that, and yeah, I guess I will be focusing on staying relevant. Although, you know, I've been around for a while. I turned 50 this year, and you
So you
know,
still have years. I mean,
I mean, who knows, right? Who knows?
yeah.
So yeah.
No, I think it's very cool. And then the last thing, Andre, we have a closing tradition on this podcast, which is called the open letter. And you can address a one sentence open letter to a specific person or to a group of people, like, for instance, to your younger self or to entrepreneurs or to your competitors, for instance. Who would it be and what would you say?
I too many letters come to mind, but because this is about venture and you know, so I'll stay professional. I would probably send a letter to my colleagues at Credo. I would tell them something like, please try and do everything even better than we've been doing it up till now. And please tell me when I become irrelevant so that I can, calmly step down. And I will.
Yeah, that's very impressive. Thank you so much, Ondrej, for your openness and for this incredible conversation. I mentioned it to you at the beginning. You were one of the first VCs that I reached out to when starting the podcast, and the reason for it was that you seem to be the opposite of the stereotype of VC, and I mean this in the most positive way, like being very approachable, like human oriented, and all this while doing exceptional work. So, and I think this conversation like really is the best proof for that. So thank you so much.
Thanks for the kind words, Luis, and good luck with the podcast and everything.